you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est Tierney qui concède le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens, le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Bittt. Embrace your true nature. And Locage. If the last time you went to Locage was when the Habs won the Cup, it's time you went back to Locage. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro, the Sick Podcast on this Thursday night, February 23rd. Happy 20th birthday to my son, Anthony. 20 years old, February 23rd. It's the Sick Podcast, brought to you in part by Energy Transportation Group, a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America, driven to be different. Also brought to you in part by Locage. If the last time you went to Locage was when the Habs won the Cup, it's time you go back to Locage. The menu will surprise you. And brought to you in part by Bittt, brewed in Quebec and a winner of a dozen international awards. Bittt offers quality microbrewery beers made with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. Bittt, embrace your true nature. If you'll allow me, a pretty cool story, right? So I mentioned it's my eldest 20th birthday today. My youngest is going to turn 18 next week. And so I remember, because today the snow came down and it came down pretty hard. Is my mic okay? Is my mic? Because everything seems like it's okay here. I'm not sure what's going on. Let me just see. Hold on a second here. Sorry about that. I've been told that my mic is not at 100%. Okay. Is mic at 100% now? It probably will be. Yes. Can someone give me a thumbs up? Yes. Yes. Testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2. It seems like it's a lot better now. Fantastic. Thank you, Sammy. Sammy back at Master Control is on top of everything. All right. So today the snow came down and it came down pretty hard. And there was a lot of slush on the roads and the driving conditions weren't all that great, okay? So it's funny because 20 years ago, or just over, it was Saturday, February 22nd, 2003. The Montreal Canadiens were hosting the Toronto Maple Leafs at the Bell Center. And that night, there was a huge winter storm. And my wife was due any day, and she started to have contractions. I had started in the business probably about 5 or 6 months before, working in sports media, but I was about a month and a half on the job, full-time status, hosting the afternoon drive. And so we're watching the game. My wife has contractions, and she's a little bit nervous. She wants to make her way to the hospital, and I'm kind of hoping that I can finish watching the game. It's the Canadiens and the Leafs. It's on a Saturday night, right? It's hockey night in Canada. But it was funny. So I said to my wife, here you go. Thank you. My son brought me my bottle of water. So I said to my wife, I said, let's wait after the game and stuff. Let's see how it goes. And my wife says, who would be crazy enough to be going to that game tonight? Who would be crazy enough? And they go to commercial during the game. And as they go to commercial, her gyno, our doctor, Dr. Robert Colby, the camera zooms in right on him. And he's there. And he's a big Montreal Canadiens fan. Who's a big Montreal Expos fan, too. He's a big sports fan in general. And he was there. So I said to my wife, I said, look, even if you get yourself to the hospital, I said, Doc's at the game, so nothing is going to happen. Mind you, as we all know, life of a doctor, once the patient is close to giving birth, if you're not there, they paid you and you make your way to the hospital before it happens, right? Anyway, long story short, I don't remember who won the game. That I don't remember. But I remember watching the game, and then at the end of the game, We called the hospital. We told them about her contractions. They said she was still far apart and that she could probably come in the next day. We said, there's a winter storm and we'd have more peace of mind if we would actually come in right away. And they said, okay, you know what? Take your time, come in. There is a winter storm. You're right about that. So we drove. We took our time to get there. It was like, one of the longest drives of my life. It was, an 18 or 20-minute drive that took like 45 minutes or 50 minutes or whatever it was, and made our way there. And the next morning at 9:24 a.m., while Doc and I were talking about the hockey game from the night before, Anthony came out. So that's our story with Anthony. And you're probably wondering why I remember it was 9:24, because we put an ad in the Montreal Gazette newspaper, which said on February 23rd at 9:24, Angie and Tony shoot and they score. 22 inches, all intact, with a no-trade clause in his contract. And that was it. So thank you for making me share that story with you. And now I won't bore you any longer. Without further ado, I'll bring in a couple of people who are going to join me tonight. One of them joining me for the very first time, as a matter of fact, but he's been on the Sick Podcast before, and that would be Matt Drake with Habs Eyes on the Prize. How you doing, bud?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Tony.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you for doing it, as well as Charles-Alexis Brisebois from Dans les Coulisses and a contributor on BPM Sports. Charles-Alexis, what's going on?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Very, very good. A three-man roundtable. I think we're really going to have a lot of fun tonight. It's an off night for the Montreal Canadiens. They're going to visit the Flyers in Philadelphia tomorrow, and then they're going to be back at the Bell Center on Saturday when they're going to host the Ottawa Senators. I told you yesterday, and I think I even told you the day before, that we were planning, the Sick Podcast has listened to you, and Agnello and Sammy listened to me as well, because I'd been wanting to talk CF Montreal for a while. So earlier today, we launched the Sick Podcast CF Montreal Talk. So it's the 9th podcast launched by the Sick Media Network. It's the second in Montreal. And so this one here is a Habs podcast. And the one that we did earlier today is a CF Montreal podcast. They're on two different YouTube channels. You can watch both of them on YouTube. You can listen to them both via Spotify, Google, Apple, and other social media apps. And the difference being is this one goes live Monday to Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern. And the one with CF Montreal for now is going to be a minimum of 2 times a week, 2 to 3 times a week, and it's going to be recorded, and then we upload it. So if you can give our Twitter handle a follow, it's SickPod, CFMTL, and of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel for the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk. It's absolutely free. We got that out of the way. Once again, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. Did you happen to see the injury report today in regards to Jeff Petrie? Charles-Alexis, we'll start with you.
To Jeff Petrie? No, I didn't see.
But pardon me, the Jeff Petrie. My God, what am I thinking? To Kirby Dach, pardon me. It's a long day.
Okay, yeah, that one I saw. It's hard not to see that one, right? Because it's really, really, really special, and we already knew, of course, that the Habs are, how do I say, famous about keeping their injuries for themselves. Now, someone is sick and it becomes an injury. It's really, really, really weird the way it is dealt by the Montreal Canadiens, because we just don't trust them anymore. And even when they're just releasing a news, we know something is going to happen. And today we talk about Kirby Dach. We can talk about Joel Edmondson. When the Habs said, we release a news saying until the end of the week, we're going to release another news. We're Thursday. When are they going to release it? It's always something like that with the Habs. And I don't know what to say anymore, because there is nothing new to report beside the fact that it's just laughable. I mean, I don't.
So I grabbed my phone, Matt, before we get to you, so I can go to the Canadiens Twitter handle, and it leads me to NHL.com. Forward Kirby Dach won't join the team on the road in Philadelphia. Dach was earlier diagnosed with a non-COVID related illness that has sidelined him since February 16th. Through the course of further medical evaluation and testing, it was determined that the illness-like symptoms were related to a lower body injury. Say what?
Yeah,
What?
I don't even know how that works. I don't know how that works. That reads to me like they're holding him out precautionary wise. I mean, they're not taking any chances with anybody at this point, which is probably smart. This is basically a tank season, and nobody in the organization is ever going to say, well, we're holding somebody out because we'd probably maybe kind of prefer to lose. But it kind of feels like that's what they're doing. I mean, a lower body injury that's related to an illness. I'm no doctor, but that kind of sounds like code for we don't want to play him right now. And maybe he is feeling something. And if he is feeling something, it's absolutely smart for them to hold him out. I do wish they'd be a little bit more upfront about their injury reports. As Alexis mentioned, it's always super tight-lipped from them. You never really know what a player's dealing with. It's extremely rare for them to actually come out and say exactly what it is. And in this case, it seems so convoluted that it just reads to me like they're holding him out for precautionary reasons. And because honestly, they don't want to go on the road and win a bunch of games right now. They'd prefer maybe to improve their draft position or their draft lottery position a little bit.
No, seriously. So think about that. It was a non-COVID related illness, right? Which now has it ends up being a lower body injury. So what happened there exactly? He had a cold, and now all of a sudden he's got hemorrhoids. Like, this is crazy. Like it's insane.
I don't know. Maybe the nighttime cold medicine made him a little groggy, and he tripped on his steps and hurt his knee a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it's a bruise. Who knows, right? Like Alexis said, they're so tight-lipped.
Yeah, it's the first time I have Matt on the Sick podcast, and I like him already, and I'm going to tell you why. Because he said something, which is an opinion that I had even a year ago. 1 year ago, with the Canadiens, like, near the bottom of the standings and at the bottom of the standings, I was convinced that when players went down with an injury, they were taking their time to bring them back. And a lot of people said, well, now you're questioning the integrity of this and that and whatever. Listen, tell me I'm questioning this or that. Tell me whatever you want. But in a lost season, there's no reason to pick up points. And last year, I'm convinced, and I could be wrong, by the way, but I have to give an opinion. That's just the way I am. I'm convinced they were taking their time with guys coming back with injury. And I'm convinced that they're doing the same thing this year. What's mind-boggling to me is that Cole Caulfield was playing through a shoulder injury, but that could be that Cole Caulfield and his agent absolutely insisted that he play because they thought he would still be good enough to play and he wouldn't harm it any further until he actually took himself out of the lineup because they're looking for a long-term contract. And if he was going to score 50 goals, well, then he was going to break the bank. But Charles-Alexis, like Matt said, it definitely looks like they're not rushing guys back into action. And you know what? If they're out with an injury, it's like, you know what? Stay out.
I think you're right because you think about last year and this year, the length of the injuries. Every time a guy is down, he's not down for a week or two. It's always 6, 8, 10 weeks. It's very, very, very long. And we're not talking, obviously, about the long term, the Carey Price or the Paul Byron or the Shea Weber, but the guys are actually playing. It's always a very long injury. It's the case for the older guys. It's the case for the young guys too. You think of a Kaden Goulet, it's a long time. Arbor Xhekaj, it's gonna be a long time. All the first picks, Juraj Slafkovsky, it's gonna be a long time. Cole Caulfield, you talked about it. The season is over. There are a lot of examples that tends to show that they seem to want to have those guys on the sideline for a while, and they prefer to pick a guy on waivers rather than having a veteran coming back.
Habination says more Habs content, less CFL. I think we talked about CFL and the ownership situation probably for, I don't know, like 10 minutes total ever since the beginning. I have no idea. But anyway, Anthony, who is it? Andy Zaff said, this sounds like a staph infection. Can it be? I don't have a lot of experience in this stuff, by the way. I've
had a staph infection before, and it does, like, the most common, one of the very common areas to get it is like in your shin. But usually a staph infection is when you're, like, for example, if you wrestle or if you do Brazilian jiu-jitsu or something like that, if you're rolling around on dirty mats with other guys and you can catch an infection like that. If Kirby Dach was already out due to an illness, I'm not so sure that he would have gotten a staph infection, but it's entirely possible. Again, not a doctor, so I'm not going to try to, armchair doctor it from my office here, but it seems a little bit like a stretch to me. And it sounds like something like in his last game, he looked perfectly fine. He didn't look like any worse for wear. It really sounds to me like they're holding him out because anybody feels anything right now, you hold him out, right? You're not trying to win games. They don't matter, right? So there's no reason to risk anybody. Could it be a staph infection? Sure, absolutely. But
yeah, Charles-Alexis, we talked about Joel Edmondson, and I have his injury report right here, and I'll bring this one up as well. And look, the Canadiens have promised to be a lot more transparent over the last couple of years, and there's been some instances where they have been. But defenseman Joel Edmondson's rehab is progressing well. The club will provide a further update at the end of the week. Like, is rehab like can you? He's got a back injury, right? Like the whole world knows. This is Montreal, and everyone lives, dies, and sleeps Montreal Canadiens, right? You don't even have to watch a game to know that Edmondson has had back problems since last year, and it's a back injury that's kept him out. Why? Well, why are you writing this for? But they write this and then they say, well, you know what? We want to be more transparent. Look, I love this new organization that has been like over a year old now, but I mean, come on, man. I understand you want to protect players. I get that too, but I mean, everyone knows.
The other thing is don't say that you're going to provide an update and then not provide it, right? They did that with Monahan, I think twice, where they said they were going to provide an update and then they don't. Yep. So if you're going to say that with Edmondson, at least give us the update.
No mention of Monahan in this injury report today. None. It's like the guy he doesn't even play for this team anymore.
Yep.
And let's talk about the Joel Edmondson thing because almost a month ago, he left the game, and then we learned that it was bottom half of the body. And then the next day, we thought, oh, okay, now it's upper body. So that changed during the night. So there's another switch in the injury. And then for almost a month, he is day to day, not week to week, not on injury list, day to day. That's a lot of days, Tony. And I'm wondering if we were after March 3rd, would he be on the injury report? Probably, because right now I think they're just scared to put him there because they don't want to afraid some GMs in case there is something somewhere who wants to take a look at Joel Edmondson, because you cannot be day to day for almost 26 or 27 or 28 days. It's impossible the way they deal with that. And you talked about being transparent. One example that comes to mind, the reason, Tony, why they don't want to say what the injuries are, it's because when they come back on the ice, they could be targeted.
Of course,
we know why.
Yes,
we know why Cole Caulfield was sidelined. It's because of his shoulder. And when he was about to get under the knife, they asked him what exactly is the shoulder injury, and he said, "I can't say." Why can't you say? Don't the other players, they know they're going to target your shoulder if they have to. Whatever is the technical name of the operation, they don't care on the ice. But why can't you just say it? That's another example that you can add to all of that drama that comes in Montreal when it comes to injuries. It's crazy.
Yeah, here's Richard Weebe, I believe. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Chances are I'm not, and I apologize for that. Who says via YouTube Live that what if Kirby Dach is being pulled for a possible trade? Look, folks, I'm not going to discount anything because, I mean, no player is untouchable, but, I mean, come on. That's not the case. Guys, that's like, what would you bet on that? Like, I wouldn't even bet $1 on that.
No, me neither.
No.
Right? I mean, every player can be traded, but it's not in the line of what the Habs are trying to do. I don't see what team would want to acquire him right now. Why he would be that preferred option for a Stanley Cup team. I don't think it is really possible. I'm not saying he's going to finish his career in Montreal, but right now I'm pretty sure he's going to finish the year.
I think he's shown enough that he could potentially be like your number 2 center moving forward, depending on what happens with the next draft, right? I don't think that the Habs are going to part ways with him unless they get a king's ransom. And if that was the case, I find it hard to believe that there'd be no whispers about it because we haven't even seen a rumor that anybody's been interested in trying to acquire him. So I don't see the Montreal Canadiens going out there and fishing for a trade for Kirby Dach while they're holding him out. Is it possible? Sure. But I think it's pretty unlikely that they're trying to trade him, given what he's done so far this season. I think they're looking at that trade that they made back at the draft, and they're saying, yeah, we did good on that one. So I think they're probably looking to hold on to him and see how that pans out moving forward into next year and beyond.
So speaking of YouTube Live, Habination says, I trade Dach. It's a rebuild, and that wasn't a joke. Come on, folks. Just for this reason that it is a rebuild, you don't trade Kirby Dach. He's
I think he's
22
working for the
years old.
Blackhawks.
Hey, he's 22 years old. He's in his 4th season in the National Hockey League. He turned 22 a month and 2 days ago. The fact that you're in a rebuild and you have Kirby Dach under contract for the next 4 years, under $3.5 million, 4 years in the National Hockey League. Come on, man. That's one of the last players I trade on this team. He's 22 years old. And Matt just talked about the fact that he could be a second-line center. Who knows? He could probably end up being a first-line centerman on this team if he reaches the full potential that was seen in him when he was drafted 3rd overall. Charles-Alexis?
Yeah, it's way too early. We're not the Blackhawks. We're not going to trade a guy like Kirby Dach right now. We don't know what his potential is yet. And you just said it. Maybe he's going to be the first centerman. Maybe he's going to be the second centerman. Maybe he can play wing if a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois comes in. There are a lot of possibilities, and it's really too early to statuate until he develops correctly. So let's take advantage of the fact that he's right now in Montreal. He can develop in an environment with absolutely no pressure, and let's see where it goes, and let's not trade him.
Yeah, Ghislain Laframboise says, remember Wayne Gretzky got traded. We remember Ghislain, but you have to remember a couple of things. Wayne Gretzky had already won several Stanley Cups with the Edmonton Oilers, number one. Number two, the Edmonton Oilers were in a lot of financial trouble back then with Peter Pocklington and everything that was going on. Number three, Los Angeles really wanted to add a star, and they wanted Gretzky badly. And number four, if we recall, at the time, he was dating Janet, and Janet was from Los Angeles, so it would have been really cool. The Kings, they wanted to make a splash, right? They wanted to make a huge splash. And the Edmonton Oilers got a lot in return, as a matter of fact. They ended up winning a Stanley Cup after they traded Wayne Gretzky. But the situations are entirely different. Folks, the Canadiens are in a rebuild. Kirby Dach is an ideal player for this rebuild. Doesn't matter how many players on the Canadiens roster are more ideal for a rebuild over the next 3 years, more so than Kirby Dach. Think about it. He's probably the most ideal player on the entire team, okay? Because Nick Suzuki's under contract at $7.875 million or whatever it is. Cole Caulfield's going to sign a long-term contract where you think you would get at least that much money, okay? So now take a look at the other young players. Yeah, there's good ones. There's Caden Gooley for sure. There's Slavkovsky. But, Kirby Dach, once again, 22 years old, 4th year in the National Hockey League, having a really, really good season. He's probably the most ideal player to have during a rebuild. There was news today that shocked me, and it came courtesy of a collaborator on this show who's usually a collaborator every Thursday, which is George Larac. But George couldn't join me today because he's on a plane right now, so he joined me 2 days ago. But earlier today at BPM Sports, 91.9 on your FM dial, Montreal's number one all sports radio station in Quebec, George Larac said that he has it on good information that the Montreal Canadiens are going to trade Michael Matheson between now and next Friday's trade deadline. I almost fell off my chair, and I wasn't even sitting. I don't even know if that makes sense, but what I'm trying to say is that comment shocked me like I can't believe, and I love George. And George, if you're right, I'm going to issue the biggest apology known to man. But I am willing, George, if you're listening right now on that plane and you got Wi-Fi, or if you arrived at destination probably by now, I am willing to bet George anything, that the Montreal Canadiens do not trade Michael Matheson before next week's trading deadline. I'll bet him anything. Charles-Alexis, anything.
I think you have your right guy for a bet, because you know that Georges Larac is going to take on it. But seriously, Mike Matheson was acquired to bring a veteran presence on that blue line. And I know that you have to trade some of them, but I do not think that Matheson is the solution. He is 28 years old. He is kind of young for an NHL player. Obviously, he's a little bit older in Montreal, but we need that here. He has an affordable contract. It's not the smallest in the NHL, of course, but it's a good one to have here. He's not a I think that Kent Hughes really wanted to have him. He was his former agent. He's really happy to be here. He fits in the NHL team that Hughes wants. He's talented and he's fast. That's the kind of player that he wants.
And that Marty St. Louis wants, and he's from here.
Yeah, exactly. That he is a Quebecois. He grew up here. His family is here. His wife is happy here. I don't know why you want to trade a guy like Mike Matheson. You have other options to trade, so I'm not sure I would go with Matheson.
I don't know what George has been doing with that pillow. I don't know what he's been doing with that pillow. Matt probably has no idea what I'm talking about because Matt probably hasn't seen George on the podcast in the last little while. But George usually shows up with a pillow. He usually lies.
I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, usually lies on a bed or on a sofa holding onto that pillow. I don't know what he's done with that pillow, but once again, George, if you're listening, I will bet you anything. Anything. Is that clear? Anything. Like if George would say, I'll bet you Matheson's going to get traded between now and Friday, and I would say no. And I would say, George, I want you to get me a Connor McDavid rookie card or a Connor McDavid jersey autographed. And I would say, you on your end, whatever you want. And he would say, Tony, I want you to go outside in the winter, just you and your pillow, and run, around 5 streets of Villa Sal. I would do it. I'm that convinced that Michael Matheson will not get traded.
Yeah, let me play devil's advocate here for a second though, right? Because I agree with you guys. I don't think Mike Matheson is somebody that they're trying to trade, and I don't think necessarily he's somebody that they should trade. However, if they got the right offer, right? If some team came along and threw a king's ransom at them, I think they've got the flexibility at this point to do it. Justin Barron has improved leaps and bounds throughout the course of this season. Caden Gooley's a number 1 defender. You absolutely know that he can play on your top pair. Arbor Jacki, one of the greatest, underdog stories that the Habs have had in a long time, coming from an undrafted guy that was working at Costco and making his way to the NHL. Johnny Kovacevic has shown that he can eat NHL minutes, and you have other young defensemen coming up as well. Adam Engstrom, I have it on very good authority. He's doing extremely well in Sweden right now. I haven't watched him very much myself, but my colleague Pat Bexel has watched him a lot, and he's doing very well. Logan Mailloux is tearing it up in the OHL. You've got young defensemen coming up, and at some point, you're going to run out of space for some of these veteran guys. And I wonder, again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I wonder if a team approached Kent Hughes with the right offer where they said, listen, multiple picks and a prospect, is he going to pull the trigger on it? I think that's the question that we need to ask. Are they looking to trade him? I absolutely don't think that they are. I don't think that he was shopping him whatsoever. I do not think they're going to shop a mobile defenseman who skates well and who is from the Montreal area. However, if somebody called with that offer, I think Kent Hughes is picking up the phone.
He's always gonna pick up the phone, but I hear you, and the reasoning is good. They have depth on left side of the fence that's unreal, but a lot of those players that you talked about, some of them are young, others are not in the league yet, so they're not proven in the league. They're going to need to play with somebody, and out of all the veterans on defense on this team, and think about them, who are they? Michael Matheson, Joel Edmondson, Chris Weidman, David Savard. Those are the 4 veterans on defense, correct?
Yeah, that's
Who's the one that you would keep more than anybody?
Oh, definitely Matheson. If I have my pick, I'm picking Matheson over all those guys for sure.
But your argument is that out of the 4 of them, the one that brings you the most return is Michael Matheson, and I get that too.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to go forward with a lot of young defensemen and I want to bring them along and I want to groom them, I'm going to choose the best one to mentor them and not the worst. Charles-Alexis?
Matheson is playing like 27 minutes per game right now, and you know that they need him. And my concern about trading a guy like him mid-season, you know that the salary cap is really really important right now, and I don't know how a team can acquire a $5.8 million guy for the next 3 years also right now at the trade deadline. And even if like one team or two teams can, I'm not sure Kent Hughes can create a bidding war big enough to say, you know what, I have absolutely the feeling that this is going to be the best prize that I'm going to have, so I'm pulling the trigger right now. If he has to be traded, and it's really hypothetical, I think it's like a Josh Anderson case. It has to be during the summer when the teams have a little bit more cap and they can create that bidding war where they say, okay, now I'm comfortable with the price that I'm getting. That being said, you know, it just takes one team to make that offer, but I'm not sure. I'm not convinced it's going to happen during the next 8 days.
Vitaly Kravtsov kept out of the lineup for roster management. Guys, he's a former draft pick of Jeff Gorton with the New York Rangers, who was drafted in the first round, 9th overall several years ago. With Kravtsov clearly on the block, if Gordon was interested before, Matt Drake, is he interested again?
I mean, I think he's interested. I definitely don't see him giving up too much in terms of, like, certainly not any draft capital if that's what New York is looking for. If they're looking for maybe a roster player, they might be interested, but they might also have to sauce a pick over the Habs way as well. I think Kent Hughes has clearly made a focus on trying to build through the draft. I don't see him necessarily just going after players that he has drafted before, but I think he'd be interested if New York's willing to also maybe part ways with a pick, and maybe they can acquire one of those veteran defenders that's not Mike Matheson.
Charles-Alexis?
I'm just not sure how it would fit right now, because the Rangers, maybe they try to acquire Patrick Kane, but why do they send a guy like Kravtsov, who he doesn't have the biggest value, but he has some? Why do they send him to Montreal right now? I don't think there is a fit to trade between the Habs and the Rangers right now if it's not a three teams trade, and I don't know if it's going to include Kravtsov in Montreal. So I don't see it happening right now, and maybe they want to concentrate on those draft picks.
All right. Here's Nick Vella says people are saying that Connor Bedard is too small. What in the world to dominate in the National Hockey League? Can you teach stupid? Hey, a lot of people are always going to bet against small players. That's just the way it is. I'm not going to bet against Connor Bedard. I'm going to bet on Connor Bedard. My eyes saw what they saw at the World Juniors. My eyes see what they see in the WHL. My eyes see what they see when you see how hard this kid works, and just my ears, he's programmed to be great. And so he's going to be great. That's just the way I see it.
There's nothing wrong with that kid, and you see it on the ice, you see it everywhere, you see it off the ice also. I don't know if you read the Nicolas Cloutier's paper on TVA Sport about his family. You see that he is grounded, he has good roots. There's nothing wrong with him, and there is no debate. I don't know why there's a debate, Tony, because he's going to be a future star in the NHL, and if you're number one, you just take it.
If you watch him play, he's actually extremely physical, despite the size issue. It's a non-issue, but people want to make it an issue. I've seen people tweet out, "Oh, he's a 5'7" winger. He's not a first overall draft pick." I mean, sure, if that's the way that you want to look at it, the way you should be looking at it is he's a generational talent who can play all three positions up front. He can do pretty much whatever he wants on the ice whenever he wants to, and he has one of the sickest releases that I've seen in my lifetime. If anybody's worried about his size, they need to seriously consider firing their entire scouting staff and hire entirely new staff to make sure that you don't overlook a player due to them being slightly shorter than 6 feet tall.
All right. Without talking about the trade deadline, which is next Friday, what's the number one thing when you think of the Canadiens right now that is something that you're going to look out for, that is something you're going to watch out for, that is something that you're interested in? Matt, we'll start with you.
I'm interested in goaltending. I think goaltending, ever since we figured out that Carey Price is probably never going to play again, I think it's a question mark. Samuel Montembeault has shown a lot this season.
Probably.
He's been more than probably. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
It's definitely an issue, and we have no idea who it is that could be the next starter. I mean, it could be Samuel Montembeault. Let's be honest. He's had a very good season so far. He's been very consistent. It's been probably the best season of his career so far. I don't think it's Jake Allen. Jake Allen's starting to age out. I think he's going to be on the move maybe in the offseason to another team. And they've got a couple of young goaltenders as well. Caden Primo, I guess he's still a bit of a question mark. He had a really good playoff for Laval, but we're still not entirely sure what he is. Can he be a number one goaltender in the NHL? You have Jakob Dobish in the NCAA who's doing very well. He's a potential guy that could maybe come up and eventually be a starter. There's just a lot of question marks, right? Frederick Dichow as well, playing over in Europe. But there's still question marks. We don't know what these guys can do in the NHL. And I think the Habs at this deadline might try to target somebody's goaltending prospects on a team that's looking to make a run in the playoffs and obviously doesn't have a need for that goaltending prospect that they're not using right now. I think they're going to try to beef up that position. I'd be surprised if they don't acquire at least one already drafted goaltending prospect through the course of this deadline.
Charles-Alexis, what's your answer to the question?
The center line, because we talk about Nick Suzuki not having necessarily the best season since Sean Monahan is out, and for me it speaks for itself, because if you name me a good NHL team, I will name you a good center line, and you need to have your first centerman protected. So the way Nick Suzuki is playing right now shows that, yes, he needs to improve, of course, because it's on him, but he also needs to have that protection. So is it going to come from Kirby Dach? Is it going to come from Pierre-Luc Dubois? Is it going to come from the first round pick that's going to be drafted in a few months? Is it going to come from another player? I don't know, but you need to have that stabilized before thinking to the wings. So I'm gonna look at how they're gonna develop Nick Suzuki in that center line.
Maxim Comtois, Renaud Lavoie says that you can probably see him. You'll probably see him change address sometime soon, which would mean between now and next Friday. Seeing as Maxim Comtois is un gars de chez nous, everyone's asking the question already: should the Montreal Canadiens go after Maxim Comtois? Maxim Comtois, who is from Longueuil, and was drafted in the second round, 50th overall by the Anaheim Ducks, who has played now, over 4 seasons in the National Hockey League, is 6'2", 210 pounds, 215 maybe, 24 years old. Matt?
I'm giving a no on that one. Nothing against Maxime Comtois as a player, but we've seen what happens when the Habs try to over-pursue les gars de chez nous, comme on dit. It never seems to end super well for them. I think they might want to avoid that one. I don't see how he fits within the context of the rebuild right now, and I don't see the point in trying to make a play over to Anaheim to try and bring him over.
Charles-Alexis?
I mean, if the price is good, yes, but I'm not sure the Ducks are going to let him for absolutely nothing or close to nothing. So I'm not sure they will find the price to meet for the Ducks. And if the fit could be somewhere else on the roster, for example, a goaltender, a center lineman, or a right shot defenseman, I think maybe you should prioritize that to a winger like Maxime Comtois. But if the price is good, maybe you can take a guess.
Comtois, of course, was the World Junior captain, right? Was he not back in 2000?
I'm not sure if I believe he was the captain, or was he? Yeah, he was the World Junior captain. But that was the one where he missed the penalty shot and he took all that abuse on Twitter.
Yeah,
right?
He took all that abuse on Twitter. That's one thing. But wasn't that the year of the? Am I missing something here? Was he not over the scandal of with the World Juniors?
Yeah, it was
the allegations.
That was the same year. I don't think he was involved, as far as I know. I don't think he was involved, but that was the same year. It was 2018. 2019, I guess. It was that 2018-19 season.
Correct. Yeah, 18-19. Well, he denied any involvement. At one point, he had come out with a release saying that he was made aware of the allegations of sexual abuse against some of his former teammates, but he denied playing a role in it, right?
I think they
I don't
all
recall
denied
seeing a
at some
statement
point.
from him.
Charles-Alexis?
I think they all denied at some point. So I don't know which one I need to believe right now, but officially probably denied.
Yeah. Here we go. He put out a tweet July 20th. I just Googled it. It's coming up. Let me see if I'm aware of the allegations of sexual abuse made against some of my former teammates on the Canadian World Junior Hockey team. The allegations are deeply troubling, and I'm cooperating with investigators to help as much as I can. I was not involved in any way with the alleged abuse, and as far as I know, no one has ever suggested otherwise. Out of respect for the investigation, I do not intend to offer further public comment. The reason I remember this, Snappy, I remember it because, that whole, as far as I know, there were a lot of lawyers who said that was, pretty appropriate to be in there, because should anything ever be proven otherwise, you just said, well, as far as, I'm not so sure. So, but anyway, he denies it, and hopefully he wasn't a part of it, because, it's not good, obviously. It's not good. And if you go out and you acquire a player like that, and then a story like that happens to come out at one point, well, listen, he denied any wrongdoing in that, and hopefully he wasn't part of it. Okay, so you both said no to Maxim Comtois?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I understand the whole pressure on guys from here. And if there's a lot of it, it's not going to help them, and it's actually going to be counterproductive. It won't work out. But how much pressure would there be on a Maxim Comtois? Like, what would be his role on the Montreal Canadiens if they would go after a guy like that?
I don't think he would have a ton of pressure. I mean, as Charles-Alexis mentioned, they're reasonably covered at the wing right now. But we've seen this before with other players. They can come in with virtually no pressure, and if they start to perform well, then the expectations go up. Sorry.
No problem at all. He's RFA. He had $2 million on his last contract. What would he have on his next contract? He's not. It's not like he's got incredible numbers. 5 goals, 5 assists, 10 points in 45 games. He's a fourth liner, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly if we need that. That being said, you just know that if he is traded somewhere, he's traded to Philadelphia or whatever the team, and he explodes everywhere in Montreal, we're gonna hear, why didn't the Montreal Canadiens try to acquire a Quebecois who's good at somewhere else? So there's always that debate, and you need to have that question, because of course he grew up here, he played in Victoriaville and in Drummondville. You need to have that question, but if the fit is not there, I mean, you cannot acquire every Quebecois who's available. So there's a discussion to have, but I'm not sure the fit is there.
All right. Everyone knows the Canadiens are depleted. Everyone knows that Laval has sent a lot of players here. Is that the best way to explain the Canadiens picking up Chris Tierney earlier today off of waivers? Matt?
Yeah, I mean, they were trying out Jonathan Drouin at center again. So I think they absolutely knew that they were lacking at the center position, and they saw an opportunity to pick up a center who has NHL experience, and they went for it. I mean, Jonathan Drouin cannot play center. We've seen that experiment before. It's gone well in short spurts, but it's not something that they can rely on regularly. And with the lack of bodies right now, they just had to go out and pick up somebody who can play center for them. So it makes sense. Does it help the team win games? I don't think so, but it makes a lot of sense to do.
He was a pretty decent player a couple of years ago with the Ottawa Senators. Probably had a career year, but just it was all downhill from there.
It was downhill, and when you're in the position of the Montreal Canadiens, you're just asking, where's the risk? His contract is very small; it expires at the end of the season, and you clearly see that it is to just remplir un chandail. So they just want someone to fill in, because there are a lot of injuries right now. And Tony, if you remember at the beginning of the season, there were, if I exclude Paul Byron, there were 15 guys on that team, and we said they're never gonna call someone from the AHL. And as you know, Alex Belzil is here. Raphaël Harvey-Pinard is here. Yessi Lonen is here. There are a lot of guys. A guy like Michael Pezzetta was not playing at the beginning of the season. Now he's playing every day. So the injury, the injuries can change a lot of things right now, and the Chris Tierney thing is just another example. We need to have a guy to fill in a jersey. That's it.
Playground, over 600 machines, poker tournaments, playground, casino games, daily promotions, unmatched customer service. Why go anywhere else? Located just over the Mercier Bridge, only minutes from downtown Montreal. It is Playground. All right, we just talked about the Canadiens, and we're going to get back to Chris Tierney in just a minute here. But speaking of waiver pickups, a couple of months ago, Eli Tolvanen, formerly of the Nashville Predators, a first-round pick, 30th overall, who had shown some promise but then struggled with consistency. He's got a really good shot, guys, a great one-timer on the power play. Here's a guy who can probably play either wing, and here's a guy who's got an ability to score goals. It just wasn't happening with Nashville, but early on in his career at age, 23 or 24, whatever it is, they put him on waivers. The Canadiens had a crack at him, and they passed. And he got picked up by the Seattle Kraken. I think he's been a great pickup for the Kraken. He's tailed off a little bit lately, but I don't understand when this is one that I don't understand. We all know they're rebuilding, but one of the things they said that they were looking for in the rebuild is they were looking for prospects that were a couple of years into the National Hockey League so that it could accelerate their rebuild. They had a chance to get one for free. Clearly, they didn't because they were not a fan, and that's okay. I just don't get how they just didn't think it was worth the risk, because what was the risk? Am I missing something here?
No,
I think
that was a whiff. That was a whiff by the Habs for sure. I think they had an opportunity there and they passed it up. I have no idea why they passed it up. Maybe the games that they saw specifically, that their scouting staff or that Kent Hughes was looking at, that when he was playing in Nashville, maybe they saw some games where he just played really poorly and they said, we're going to let this one be. I think it warrants maybe a revision of how they're looking at some of these players that are already in the NHL, how far back they're going, and what kind of qualities they're looking for in players, because they clearly missed the mark on that one. I think he's got, 14 or 15 points already with the Kraken in like 20 some odd games. So clearly there was a better player than the Nashville players realized that they had. And if the Habs had been able to pick up on that, like the Kraken did, it could have been, like you said, something that jumpstarts, that accelerates the rebuild a little bit.
I guess if it's not a question of I don't like the player or I don't like the person, I have a theory, but I hope I'm wrong. Maybe if you remember, like I said at the beginning of the season, there were a lot of guys, and we were talking about, should we send Juraj Slavkovsky down because we need to have a place when the injuries are back. I don't remember exactly which guys because it's been a few months, but maybe there's a question of there was no room for him. If it is the reason, though, it's not a good reason, because when you rebuild, the young players should have the priority. You need to find ways to add them to your roster. So if that's the reason, that's a bad call. But again, maybe there is a thing, like Matt said, that maybe they just didn't like the game that they saw when they scouted him. There may be some of that reason, but clearly you see what he's doing in Seattle right now, and there are more teams than just the Montreal Canadiens who are saying, oh no, we missed that one.
Hey, 4 points for Connor McDavid tonight in an Oilers 7-2 win in Pittsburgh, as McDavid's Oilers just dismantle Crosby's Penguins tonight. It looks like it's all downhill for the Penguins, eh?
But we say that every year, and it maybe this is really the year. I'm gonna really say it, the year that they are completely down, because I don't want to take against Sidney Crosby, but that year it doesn't look really promising. They're really good. Jeff Petrie is not the player that they hoped he could be, but they had a few injuries in Pittsburgh, but no, it's not a great year, let's say.
The Penguins have lost 4 in a row. The Capitals lost tonight. They've now lost 6 in a row. I knew the Capitals had lost 5 in a row when they took on the Ducks tonight, but I think the Ducks were playing their third game in 4 nights. They too are depleted with injuries, all 3 of them on the road. So I thought, if there was one that Washington was going to win, it was this one. Boy, was I wrong. But, I have an opinion on something. The Bruins are truly a remarkable team, because the Bruins, they won a Stanley Cup and they went to 2 other Cup finals. And since 2011, 12 years later, the Boston Bruins are still a very competitive team with a very realistic and solid chance of winning the Stanley Cup this year. I mean, they're the best team in hockey right now, the Boston Bruins. It's remarkable they've been able to be on top after being so good since 2011. But folks, teams like the Blackhawks, teams like the Penguins, teams like the Capitals, when you go through a rebuild and you win the Stanley Cup or a couple of Stanley Cups, at one point, it's just not sustainable that you continue. Like, you have a window, and that window closes at one point after you've won it. It's just you did your run, and probably about 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years later, you have no other choice. You have to rebuild again. And the Penguins, they probably figured, you know what, as long as we have Crosby and as long as we have Malkin, we should go for it. But if they miss the playoffs this year, it's a really, really bad decision by them because, you know, bringing back Christopher Letang, guys, for where the Penguins are, good player, but I wouldn't have done it.
For 6 years. It's I understand why. I understand. I don't really understand. I mean, I understand the logic because they wanted their average to be lower, but 6 years for Christopher Letang, who has an history of injuries. I mean, I really love the player, but it was really a weird contract when we saw it. And that year, he had all sort of difficulties to stay on the ice. If they have to keep that contract, and they have the Evgeny Malkin contract, and they have to address the Sidney Crosby one, and they have a few other ones, it's going to be really, really hard because who's going to take all those players?
Matt?
Yeah. They've had generational talent on their team for the better part of 30 years. They had Mario Lemieux, they had Jaromir Jagr, and then, you know, by the time Mario Lemieux was done playing, as a matter of fact, he played a season with Crosby as well, and then they had Malkin as well. So they've just had an embarrassment of riches in terms of generational talent. And I think the reason why they signed that weird contract with Christopher Letang is because they're not ready to accept going into that rebuild. And they thought, well, we could still get more mileage out of Crosby. We could still get more mileage out of Malkin. So why don't we try to get more out of Letang as well? And I think you're seeing now that, you know, maybe that was the wrong decision in retrospect. I think they're almost falling into the same trap that the Montreal Canadiens were in for such a long time, where they just didn't want to commit to the rebuild and trade away their big pieces. And as a result, they're kind of stagnated. And now they've saddled themselves with a contract that's going to be pretty tough to get rid of. Who knows? The deadline's next week. I guess we'll see if maybe he's on the move and he ends up somewhere else. But I think that's going to be an albatross of a contract to move. And I agree with you, Tony. I wouldn't have done that one. I think it's going to set them back a little bit. And they really should have been looking at what can we do to maybe do a quick reset, at least, to give Crosby somebody to play with in the twilight of his career, instead of having to send him off somewhere else. So who knows? Maybe Crosby's on the move in a couple of years. That'd be something.
Charles-Alexis, I have a question for you. Ready?
Yep.
Do the Canadiens have a player that skates faster than Connor McDavid?
I'm going to say no, but maybe you have an example?
Yes. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at the NHL Twitter account, there's a tweet that says, these guys can really fly. Any surprises for you on this list? NHL Edge Speed, powered by Verizon. So the fastest skaters were clocked, okay? And Caden Gooley, you just said it, clocked in at 24.20 miles per hour. Connor McDavid clocked in at 24.16 miles per hour. Gooley, on another occasion, had clocked in at 24.01 miles per hour, but the 24.20 miles per hour were the fastest he was going. Now, I'm going to take a look at the list, the top 10 list, and I'm going to go from worst to best, okay? Worst of the top 10, okay? Or least fast. Shouldn't say worst, but the least fast of the top 10, okay? Nathan McKinnon, 24 miles per hour. Caden Gooley, 24.01. Nathan McKinnon again, 24.02. Jason Dickinson, 24.08. Connor McDavid, 24.16. Andreas Athanasiou, 24.18 miles per hour. Caden Gooley, 24.20 miles per hour. Martin Ferrari, 24.21 miles per hour. Braden Point, 24.26 miles per hour. And the player that clocked the fastest speed in the National Hockey League this year, gentlemen, did you see this list?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the list.
Former Montreal Canadian Ryan Poehling. That's, I'd have to say, it's a little bit. I knew he can motor, but that's a little bit shocking, guys. 24.32 miles per hour for Ryan Poehling, who has not, I wouldn't say he hasn't materialized into the player that a lot of people thought he would be, because a lot of people thought he would be a third or fourth line player. The only people who didn't were the people that after he scored 3 goals in his first game and then scored a shootout goal, thought he was going to be a star. But even Trevor Timmins, who drafted him, I don't think Trevor Timmins ever thought that Ryan Poehling was going to be better than a third line player.
No, he was always going to be that kind of player. Of course, as you said, when he scored 3 goals on that game, everybody said that's going to change the expectations. We knew it, and it did. So, I mean, it was clear that his way was out of Montreal at some point because he couldn't handle those expectations. It's great for him to see that he can skate that fast because he doesn't have a great year. He's not living up to his potential, but good for him if he can lead in something, because he needs to have that it factor if he wants to stay in the NHL, I think.
Matt?
Good news is that the Habs are drafting speedy guys. You got to like that. At the very least, they're getting some of the fastest skaters in the NHL through the draft.
Yeah.
I think it's unfortunate, and I agree 100%. That 3-goal debut, especially with Bob Cole on the call of all people in his final game, calling a game for Hockey Night in Canada. You score a hat trick, and it's Bob Cole giving you the call with
that's right. It was
his final call in the end was yes, sir.
Yeah, that's right. It was the final game of the season on a Saturday night in middle of April, right?
Yeah. What better stage could you possibly ask for to score a hat trick like that? And I agree 100%. It inflated expectations. People started believing that Ryan Poehling was something that he isn't. And it kind of stuck him in this position where he was never able to get back to that extreme high that he started out on. And it's unfortunate, but he's a good player, and clearly he can move. So I think he'll have a long career in the NHL, just not with the Montreal Canadiens.
Matt, in ending here, is there anything that you can tell us about Habs' eyes on the prize? Because I, like many, saw the news a couple of weeks ago that it looked like maybe you can go into a little bit more detail. That they were going to need they're going to need some support to be able to keep running the way they've been running. So, what's the story, and why did all this come about, and where are we at right now?
The why is tough for me to explain because, our numbers have always spoken for themselves. We've always done very well in terms of numbers. Vox Media made the decision, essentially, as far as I understand it.
What numbers are we talking about here in terms of numbers?
Website traffic.
Traffic, okay.
We always had a lot of traffic. So the reason for them cutting hockey almost entirely was not really because of traffic. It's not just our site either. The Rangers affiliate site that they had is also going. The Flyers site. Almost all of them. It seems like they've decided to kind of move away from hockey almost entirely. So it was a disappointing decision, but we decided to rally, come together, and try to keep the thing alive. And that's exactly what we're doing. Vox Media has agreed to give us back all of the intellectual property. So we have a GoFundMe up right now to try and cover the startup costs for us to get our own hosting and keep the site going exactly the way that it is moving forward. So starting on April 1st, we are still affiliated with Vox all the way through the end of March. Starting on April 1st, our site might look a little bit different, but it's going to continue exactly the way that it is.
How much funding you think you're going to need in order to stay operational for X amount of time?
For now, we have a GoFundMe goal of 10,000. That should keep us alive. I mean, the amount that we already have right now, we're over 8,000 already, I believe. So that should keep us active, no problem through. The 10,000 would keep us through the end of the year for sure. We will eventually be setting up ad revenue through that as well. So eventually it's going to be self-sustaining. The GoFundMe is to cover the startup costs so that we can get the first, 6 to 8 months out of the way. And then once we really get going, since we're keeping the domain and everything, we know that all of our SEO and everything is going to stay the same. And we're still going to be able to keep doing the same work that we do and generating the same traffic that we already generated. So we're quite confident that the site's going to sustain itself very quickly. Really, we're just looking for the support to get ourselves started on our own.
Good stuff. Keep us posted. Thanks for joining me tonight. You were a great guest, and I hope to have you on again in the very near future. All the best to you.
Thanks for having me.
Charles-Alexis Brisebois, the man that every time I reach out to him, he never says no. And this is why Donnie Coulis loves him. And this is why BPM Sport loves him too. Merci beaucoup, Charles-Alexis.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tony.
Bonne soirée, mon chum. All right, there you have it. Charles-Alexis Brisebois. All right, and Matt Drake of Habs Eyes on the Prize. If you like the podcast tonight, give us a like, give us a mention, share it with your friends, hit the like button, comment sick, SICK. It's our way of feeling the love. Thank you very much. And once again, if you're a fan of soccer and of CF Montreal, well, now there's also a CF Montreal podcast. Okay, so there's this one here talking Montreal Canadiens hockey, Monday to Friday, starting at 10 p.m. Eastern. And there's another one on a totally separate YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to, which is the Sick Podcast CF Montreal Talk. We have two different Twitter handles as well for this one here, which is hockey. It's at the Sick Podcasts. And our other one, which is CF Montreal Talk, it's at Sick Pod CFMTL. If you can follow us on Twitter, if you can follow us on our Facebook group page, if you can follow us on our YouTube channels and subscribe to all the ones that we have, it's absolutely free. We very much appreciate it. If you listen on Spotify, Google, or Apple, leave us a 5-star review. It's our way of feeling the love. It's an off night for the Montreal Canadiens, but tomorrow night, the Montreal Canadiens are in action. And they'll be in action, of course, visiting Nicolas Deslauriers and the Philadelphia Flyers. I think the question should be asked, right? Watching Nicolas Deslauriers now, do you think he'd still have his spot with the Montreal Canadiens? And I guess you'd have to say yes. Heart and soul guy who defends his teammates, maybe going forward. He's 32 years old right now. Maybe going forward, he wouldn't have fit into Marty St. Louis' system or concepts, or, when the Canadiens would be a very competitive team, he probably wouldn't be on it. But for the time being, you'd have to say yes. But maybe I'm saying that because I really like him, or maybe I'm saying that because he was born right here in La Salle, Quebec. Beautiful Ville La Salle, where I live mountainside, but some others live oceanside. Tell your friends about it. The Sick Podcast. Say the podcast is pretty sick, and so is that guy. I'm going to say, which guy? And you're going to say, the guy who always says, I'm Marinaro. Have a good night. Habs at Flyers tomorrow night. The Sick Podcast will be back at 10 p.m. tomorrow night. Same time, same place. Have a great night. Ciao.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. Tibi, embrace your true nature. And La Cage. If the last time you went to La Cage was when the Habs won the cup, it's time you went back to La Cage. The menu will surprise you.